take a number of measures to strengthen this important Canadian program. Comme nous le savons, les milieux de travail et les familles changent. Il est donc normal de devoir moderniser le régime de prestation de maladie de l'assurance-emploi. Depuis sa création en 1940, l'assurance-emploi est demeurée l'un des piliers du réseau de sécurité sociale du Canada. Et depuis, la vie ici a énormément changé. So it's time to see how employment insurance sickness benefits can better support Canadians. I'll first take a moment to describe what the program is currently meant to do and what it is like now. Currently, the EI sickness benefit provides up to 15 weeks of income replacement for Canadians who are unable to work because of illness, injury, or quarantine. L'objectif des prestations de maladie de l'assurance-emploi consiste à aider les Canadiens à rester connectés au marché du travail, à leur donner du soutien financier le temps de leur guérison. Ainsi, ils pourront revenir et contribuer au marché du travail sans avoir dû également traverser d'inutiles difficultés financières. Ces prestations de maladie s'ajoutent aux autres mesures de soutien offertes en cas de maladie ou d'invalidité de longue durée, dont le programme de prestations d'invalidité du régime de pension du Canada et les régimes de santé des employeurs. On average, people who claim sickness benefits in the fiscal year 2017-2018 use 10 weeks of the benefit and then return to work. But quite a large cohort, 36%, or about 150,000 Canadians, exhausted their full 15 weeks before they could get back to work. And among these 150,000 Canadians, we know that women and older Canadians were more likely to need more than the 15 weeks. This is a very serious issue facing Canadians with sickness or injury. Imaginez que vous élevez seul vos enfants et que du jour au lendemain, vous n'êtes plus en mesure de payer les factures. Personne n'a besoin d'une telle pression, alors...
L'honorable ministre aura 16 minutes et demie après pour compléter son discours. It being 11 a.m., pursuant to order made earlier today, the House will now proceed to statements by ministers. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to begin by recognizing that we are on the ancestral land of the Algonquin people. Mr. Speaker, people are troubled by what they've been witnessing this past week. Young, old, indigenous, newcomers, they're asking themselves what is happening in this country. They're asking what lies ahead for themselves, for their communities, for Canada. They know that these protests are serious, that this is a critical moment for our country and for our future. And so do I. On all sides, people are upset and frustrated. I get it. It's understandable, because this is about things that matter: rights and livelihoods, the rule of law, and our democracy. Aux gens qui subissent les conséquences des barrages et des manifestations, vous traversez des moments difficiles. Sachez que notre gouvernement travaille fort pour trouver une solution. Notre priorité est de résoudre la situation de manière pacifique, mais aussi de protéger notre pays comme un État de droit. Nous allons toujours défendre ce principe. It is time, past time, for this situation to be resolved. But what we are facing was not created overnight. It was not created because we have embarked upon a path of reconciliation recently in our history. It is because for too long in our history, for too many years, we failed to do so. So finding a solution will not be simple. It will take determination, hard work, and cooperation. There is no relationship more important to Canada than the one with Indigenous peoples. And today, as Prime Minister, I am once again formally extending my hand in partnership and trust. Over the last 11 days, our government has been working on a path forward, even as many have been saying we should give up. Because we know what is at stake. We know that we cannot afford to fail. So we are creating a space for peaceful, honest dialogue with willing partners. As we heard this morning from Mohawk leaders and from National Chief Perry Bellegarde, we need to resolve this through dialogue and mutual respect. To the Wet'suwet'en and Mohawk nations and Indigenous leaders across the country, we are listening. We are not asking that you stop standing up for your communities, your rights, and for what you believe. We only ask that you be willing to work with the federal government as a partner in finding solutions. You remind us, rightly so, that too often trust has been betrayed in the history of Indigenous negotiations with Canadian governments. In fact, that underlines the difficulty of solving this situation today. But our common ground is the desire to arrive at solutions. We cannot resolve this alone. Just like we need Indigenous leaders to be partners, we also need Canadians to show both resolve and collaboration. Everyone has a stake in getting this right. Soyons clairs, notre gouvernement va continuer de travailler jour et nuit pour rapidement et paisiblement trouver une solution. Dans le passé, nous avons vu à quel point ces situations peuvent changer rapidement. Je sais qu'on veut tous trouver une solution, mais en même temps, il faut absolument éviter que les choses s'aggravent. Hier, j'ai encore une fois réuni les membres du groupe d'intervention en cas d'incident pour discuter de la situation et de la marche à suivre. Je me suis également entretenu avec les premiers ministres provinciaux pour parler des conséquences qu'ont les barrages sur les agriculteurs, les entrepreneurs, les familles, les travailleurs d'un bout de ce pays à l'autre. Over the weekend, the Minister of Indigenous Services met with representatives from Tyendinaga as well as other members of the Mohawk Nation. And I have committed to the Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs that the Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations will meet with them anytime. And I hope that the offer will be accepted. This is our opportunity now to bring these perspectives together. Because, Mr. Speaker, what is the alternative? Do we want to become a country of irreconcilable differences, where people talk but refuse to listen, where politicians are ordering police to arrest people, a country where people think they can tamper with rail lines and endanger lives? This is simply unacceptable. We cannot solve these problems on the margins. That is not the way forward. I know that people's patience is running short. We need to find a solution, and we need to find it now. I have spoken in this House about how my father faced protests over the debate about Aboriginal and treaty rights in the Constitution. Over 30 years later, many of those questions still linger, which is why our pace of change must be even faster, and not only in this situation. Despite having invested more than any other government to right historic wrongs, to close persistent gaps, we know that there is still more, much more, to be done. It is unacceptable that there are people who still don't have access to clean drinking water, that Indigenous women and girls still go missing and are murdered, that there are people without housing and good education. It is unacceptable that Indigenous peoples are still denied rights and lands, Mr. Speaker. So we need to keep finding solutions. And that can only happen by working together and by listening. Monsieur le Président, en tant que pays, nous sommes appelés à choisir la marche à suivre. C'est à nous de choisir le respect et la communication. Nous ne devons pas nous engager dans une voie où nous refusons d'écouter, où nous cédons aux hostilités. Ce n'est pas la solution. There are those who would want us to act in haste, who want us to boil this down to slogans and ignore the complexities, who think that using force is helpful. It is not. Patience may be in short supply, and that makes it more valuable than ever. Indigenous rights, climate action, law and order, building a clean economy. We will not achieve these things by degrading our
Interrupt the Honourable Prime Minister. This is a very serious topic that we're discussing today, and I'm starting to hear heckling from both sides, which really troubles me. I just want everyone to take a deep breath and listen to the speakers that we have today. We have more coming. The Honourable Prime Minister.
I think I might repeat my last sentence. Patience may be in short supply, and that makes it more valuable than ever. Mr. Speaker, in this country, we're facing many important and deep debates. Debates about the future livelihoods of our children, the future of our environment, our relations with countries around the world, our positioning on things that are fundamental at a time of anxiety. And more Canadians are impatient to see those answers. More and more people are frustrated that there is such uncertainty. And more we see those debates carried with increasing intensity on the margins of our democratic conversations. The place for these debates is here in this House. The place for these debates are around kitchen tables and community centres in this country. And yes, there is always a place for Canadians to protest and express their frustrations. But we need to ensure that we are also listening to each other. The reality of populism, Mr. Speaker, and its siren song in our democracies these days is a desire to listen only to oneself and to people who agree with them, and not with people of another perspective. And the concern with action before discussion, the need for reasoned debate in this place is at the center of what we have to continue to move forward with as a country. Indigenous rights, climate action, law and order, building a clean economy. We will not achieve these things by degrading our democracy. We must be honest about why we are here. We must be open to working together to move forward, and not just in the days ahead. But as we make progress on everything from implementing Indigenous rights and title, addressing historic wrongs, and ending long-term drinking water advisories, as a country and as a government, we need to continue the work we are doing. And we need to continue to walk this road together. To everyone, I say we are extending our hands in good faith for dialogue. The opportunity is there on the table right now. We are in this together. The worker, the senior, the Indigenous leader, the protester, and the police officer. Let us have the courage to take this opportunity and take action together, and so to build a better path for all Canadians. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, that was the weakest response to a national crisis in Canadian history. Now, I listened to the Prime Minister's word salad just now, Mr. Speaker, and at least two key things were missing. A clear denunciation that the actions of these radical activists are illegal, and some kind of an action plan that would put an end to the illegal blockades and get our economy back on track. The Prime Minister's statement was a complete abdication of responsibility and of leadership. Je viens d'écouter la salade de mots du Premier ministre. Il manque quelques points importants. la dénonciation claire que les actions de ces activistes radicaux sont illégales et un plan d'action pour stopper ces barrages illégaux et remettre notre économie en marche. La déclaration du Premier ministre est un rejet total de responsabilité et un échec de leadership. Mr. Speaker, we are at an important time in our country's history, a time when we will have to decide who and what our country stands for. Will we be a country of yes, where big national projects can get built and our country can grow and develop? Or will our country be a country of no, where a few loud voices can shut down development and prosperity for all? Will our country be one of the rule of law, or will our country be one of the rule of the mob? Will we let our entire economy be held hostage by a small group, trampling over the legal system which has governed our country for more than 150 years? Because let me be clear, Mr. Speaker, standing between our country and prosperity is a small group of radical activists, many of whom have little to no connection to First Nations communities. Exactly. A bunch of radical activists who won't rest until our oil and gas industry is entirely shut down. Now, they may have the luxury of not having to go to work every day. They may have the luxury of not facing repercussions for skipping class, but they are blockading our ports, our railways, and our borders, and our roads and highways. And they are appropriating an indigenous agenda which they are willfully misrepresenting. Hear, hear, hear. And, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's elevation of these protesters to the same level as the thousands of men and women in First Nations communities across our country who have in good faith been trying to right the wrongs of Canadian history does a disservice to the spirit of reconciliation. And the Prime Minister has emboldened and encouraged this kind of behavior by canceling other big projects based on political consideration instead of on science and on facts. Permettez-moi d'être clair, Monsieur le Président. Un groupe d'activistes radicaux s'oppose à notre pays et à notre prospérité. Nombre d'entre eux ont peu ou pas de lien avec les communautés des Premières Nations. Des activistes radicaux qui ne vont pas arrêter tant que notre secteur pétrolier et gazier ne sera pas complètement stoppé. Ils bloquent nos ports, nos chemins de fer, nos frontières et nos routes et nos autoroutes. Mr. Speaker, the reality is that a vast majority of members of the Wet'suwet'en people support the Coastal GasLink project. Every single elected band council on the Coastal GasLink route supports this project. Even the majority of hereditary chiefs support this project, Mr. Speaker. And the vast majority of First Nations community members themselves support this project because this project will create jobs, it will create opportunities, and it will lead to investments in their communities. And in the end, it will help reduce global greenhouse gas emissions. This is a fantastic opportunity for the Wet'suwet'en people, Mr. Speaker. So why are these radical activists opposing this project? Because for them, this is just a warm-up act. A warm-up act for what they consider to be the next fights against Trans Mountain, against Tech Frontier, and in the end, their goal is the entire shutdown of our energy industry. Now, it's important to remember who the victim of this all has been. Who has been victimized by Liberal inaction? It's the farmer who can't get their grain to market. It's the small business owners who can't get their shipments in time. It's the homeowners who may face trouble getting their home heating for the winter. It's the workers facing layoffs. And the ultimate victims are the Wet'suwet'en members themselves looking for prosperity for their children, Mr. Speaker. Now, Mr. Speaker, Conservatives have been calling for common sense and appropriate recommendations to end these illegal blockades. We've called on the Liberal government to enforce the rule of law. What we were expecting today was some sort of an announcement about a plan that would put an end to these illegal blockades. Les conservateurs ont présenté des recommandations sensées et appropriées pour arrêter ces barrages illégaux. Instead, today, we heard literally nothing. Now, let me be clear, Mr. Speaker. Every single Canadian has the right to free speech. Everyone has the right to say their piece, regardless how much we may agree or disagree. But nobody, and I mean nobody, has the right to hold our economy hostage, Mr. Speaker. Tout le monde a le droit de donner son point de vue, que nous soyons d'accord ou non avec le message. Mais personne, et je répète, personne n'a le droit de tenir notre économie en otage. The blockades across our country are illegal, and it's time the government stepped in and did something about that. On this side of the House, we stand with the farmers. On this side of the House, we stand with commuters. On this side of the House, we stand with workers facing layoffs. We stand with everyday, hard-working Canadians. Most importantly, on this side of the House, we stand in solidarity with the Wet'suwet'en people. We stand in solidarity with the elected councillors of the Wet'suwet'en First Nations. We stand in solidarity with the majority of hereditary chiefs from the Wet'suwet'en First Nation who recognize that these types of projects and investments are the only way to lift First Nations Canadians out of poverty, give them hope and opportunity, and give the next generation of Indigenous Canadians the same quality of life that everyone else in this country enjoys.
L'honorable député de Belleuil-Chambly.
Je suis obligé, Monsieur le Président, de nuancer les termes du chef conservateur lorsqu'il dit de ce côté-ci de la Chambre. Nous sommes du même bord de la Chambre, mais manifestement, vous ne verrez jamais quelqu'un du Bloc québécois se placer au centre d'une Première Nation et de dire, parmi vous, il y a les bandits, puis il y a les gentils qui sont d'accord avec nous autres. Qui sommes-nous? Nous, et disons-le franchement, la société blanche. Qui sommes-nous pour nous insérer entre eux puis commencer à les juger les uns puis les autres selon qu'ils sont d'accord avec l'intérêt du moment ou pas? D'une part. Alors, la ligne entre ce côté de la Chambre ou pas est ici. Outre ça, Monsieur le Président, je suis quand même obligé de demander au Premier ministre, mais ma foi, pourquoi 12 jours? Pourquoi a-t-il fallu qu'une crise qui s'annonçait nationale et grave, dès ses tout débuts, n'a-t-il d'intervention de sa part qu'au terme de 12 jours? Outre ça, pourquoi ai-je l'impression que je viens d'entendre un discours électoral de 2015? Des énoncés de valeurs, de principes, de vertus, tous plus louables les uns et les unes que les autres, avec, en effet, rien. Je comprends qu'une négociation doit exister quelque part. Je comprends qu'il doit y avoir des canaux de communication qui sont ouverts. Et je peux comprendre que le premier ministre ne veuille pas négocier sur la place publique. OK. Mais tu ne convoques pas le Parlement pour faire une adresse ministérielle si tu n'as rien à dire. Et c'est manifestement ce à quoi on vient d'assister. Les pistes de solution ne semblent pas beaucoup plus claires. Les pistes d'erreur, elles, par contre, se précisent. D'abord parce qu'on est dans le « où ». C'est comme s'il fallait, en cette Chambre, aujourd'hui, décider entre un respect nécessaire pour les Premières Nations ou ben donc l'économie canadienne. Comme si c'était d'emblée et irrémédiablement pas conciliable. Comme s'il n'était pas possible de trouver une solution à la crise qui permette, en effet, de remettre en mouvement de grands morceaux de l'économie canadienne et québécoise sans pour autant le faire au détriment de ce que veulent avoir comme discussion les Premières Nations. Moi, je pense que c'est possible. Et je vais faire un très, très bref détour. Je dis encore une fois, qui sommes-nous pour juger? Parce qu'après tout, on se revendique de la légitimité de nos démarches en invoquant une loi adoptée en 1876 qui a imposé aux Premières Nations un modèle de gouvernance qui venait de notre grande supériorité blanche. Et il y en a parmi eux qui disent « Hey, on n'est pas sûr que c'est la meilleure méthode ». Ce débat-là, à quelque part, leur appartient. Et c'est beaucoup de ça qu'il est question. Alors, on a un peu une obligation entre écoute et respect. Et à cet égard-là, je suis d'accord que le gouvernement veuille initier, enfin, dirais-je, une conversation. Par contre, il y a certainement des zones de tension existantes. On ne peut pas avoir oublié qu'il n'y a pas si longtemps, le gouvernement a soit autorisé, soit fermé les yeux sur la disposition de tireurs d'élite près du territoire des Wet'suwet'en. Il me semble qu'il y a là matière à créer un petit peu de tension. Il me semble qu'il y a là matière à ce que des gens disent « je me sens pas en confiance ». Alors après ça, dire « écoutez, nous ne devons pas entreprendre un parcours vers la tension et la violence », bien, je suis profondément d'accord. Il fallait commencer par ne pas permettre ça. Et dans cette litanie d'excuses à laquelle on a assisté au fil des ans, bien, voici une maudite belle occasion de s'excuser d'avoir permis, laisser passer une affaire du genre, qui est certainement une graine fondamentale dans la crise que nous vivons. Je ne voudrais pas, toutefois, qu'on interprète mon propos comme étant une caution des gestes. Ça ne peut pas durer. Il y a des appels à la raison qui ont été faits par des gens des Premières Nations même. Et j'imagine le sentiment un peu d'apaisement qu'on a tous vécu en se disant « OK, peut-être que de leur propre initiative, il y aurait des conversations, des possibilités, des apaisements qui permettraient la nécessaire et urgente levée des obstructions. » Une négociation, ça passe forcément par des gens qui posent des gestes en réponse des gestes de l'autre. Il faudra aller là. Il faudra s'ouvrir aussi à la différence culturelle profonde et fondamentale plutôt que d'imposer grossièrement, à coups de poing sur les pupitres, nos valeurs à nous. Alors que les Premières Nations ont le droit à la différence. Et je pense qu'il est nécessaire que nous ayons ce recul, cette prudence. Si la position qu'ils ont face au dossier de GasLink n'est pas unanime entre eux, je pense qu'il faut au moins avoir la sagesse de dégager un espace pour qu'ils puissent, eux, avoir notamment entre eux cette nécessaire conversation. Maintenant, quels sont les gestes qu'il faudra poser? Au-delà des discours, au-delà des valeurs autrement fort louables, je me demande s'il n'est pas nécessaire, mais je n'ai pas autorité. Moi, je parle juste pour le Québec, je suis un observateur, mais le Québec, parlez-en à mon collègue, subit un impact économique majeur de cette crise-là. Je me demande s'il n'y a pas lieu d'obtenir, puisque c'est une juridiction de la Colombie-Britannique et que nous, ici, on respecte les juridictions des provinces, s'il n'y a pas lieu d'obtenir, ne serait-ce que de façon temporaire, une suspension complète des travaux, qu'on dise, écoutez, on va regarder, on va se parler, et en échange de quoi? On pourrait demander, en toute légitimité, aux gens des Premières Nations de lever les différentes barricades à travers le Canada et le Québec. Je pense qu'il y a un geste mesurable, clair et concret qui, très possiblement, serait reçu par les Premières Nations comme une ouverture réelle au-delà des mots qui, dans les dernières années, n'ont trop souvent amené que des déceptions. Alors moi, j'invite, bien sûr, le gouvernement à concrétiser tout ça, faire une proposition claire et mesurable, dont j'espère qu'elle sera bien reçue parce que je réitère que le moyen n'est pas acceptable et qu'il fait aussi mal à l'économie des Premières Nations qu'à celle de la société canadienne et québécoise en général. Il faut que ça se fasse vite, il faut que ça se fasse clair et si tel est le cas, vous aurez notre collaboration. Bravo.
The honourable member for Burnaby South.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I want to acknowledge that while the Prime Minister has spoken today on a very important crisis, the Prime Minister has not shown leadership on this matter for over a month. I want to begin my comments by acknowledging the fact that it's inspiring to see the youth rising, to see people of all walks of life who are standing up for human rights, who are standing up for climate justice. Je suis inspiré par la jeunesse, les jeunes qui se battent pour l'environnement, pour les droits de la personne. C'est inspirant. But I also want to acknowledge the feelings of helplessness and uncertainty that many farmers, local producers, business folks are feeling right now. I know there's a lot of workers that are now not being able to go to work. There's a lot of people that are worried about whether or not they're going to be able to make ends meet because of the impacts. I'm thinking about all these people right now, all Canadians. But I'm thinking about the people at the blockade who are standing up because they are so frustrated. They are so angry, and they're right to be angry. See, the context of what's going on, something the Prime Minister alluded to, is a deep frustration. It's historic, absolutely. The injustice, the bitter and horrible injustice faced by the first people of this land, if you have any compassion, your heart would result in some frustration and some anger. This is a serious crisis that we're faced with. It's not, sadly, what the Prime Minister referred to it as, quote, an infrastructure disruption. Ce que se passe maintenant au Canada, c'est vraiment une crise sérieuse. Canadians are expecting us all to show some leadership. They're also expecting the Prime Minister to show leadership. But sadly, the reality is the Prime Minister has let a lot of those people down. There's been centuries of broken promises to Indigenous people. And those broken promises aren't just broken words, but have resulted in massive injustice, have resulted in massive inequality, and resulted in the deaths of Indigenous people. Indigenous people have been denied basic human rights. Now, the Prime Minister promised to be different, but he broke those promises, and he didn't show to be very different. Let's look at his record. The Prime Minister will talk about, and the government, the Liberal government will talk about the record, but let's look at their record right now. What is going on in our country? We've got a Human Rights Tribunal decision that found that the government didn't just underfund or discriminate Indigenous kids, but they did so recklessly, willfully, purposefully. On top of that, to add insult to injury, this government is taking those kids to court and not even being clear about how many millions of dollars they're spending fighting these First Nation kids in court. Not only in child welfare has this Prime Minister and this Liberal government let down First Nations, Inuit and Métis when it comes to the funding of education for First Nations, when it comes to the underfunding of programs. Something as simple as a program to allow women to rightfully reclaim status, that program has been underfunded. There's been massive inconsistencies with what the Prime Minister says and then what the Prime Minister does. We're in the year 2020. I can accept no excuse that the Liberal government, coming off of a 5-year majority, can ensure that every single Indigenous community in this country has clean drinking water. There is no excuse. With the technology and the wealth of our country, there is no excuse why clean drinking water as a right could not be assured. C'est complètement inacceptable. C'est incompréhensible comment en 2020, on ne peut pas atteindre les cibles de s'assurer que toutes les communautés autochtones peuvent avoir accès à l'eau potable. On top of that, when a young activist raised concerns about clean drinking water in her community, at a private fundraiser, the Prime Minister mocks that young person in front of his wealthy donors. That's the response of this Prime Minister. And that's a part of why this crisis is where it is right now. The Prime Minister said that he knew better than elders and that what young Indigenous people really needed was just a place to store their paddles and their canoes. I mean, that does not show a respect of the seriousness and the gravity of the problems that colonialism has left on the first people of this land. And now speaking about the current issue. The Wet'suwet'en chiefs, nearly more than a month ago, made a request for the federal government to play a role. They specifically asked for the Prime Minister, they specifically asked for the federal government to play a role in resolving this conflict. Now we asked the question, New Democrats asked the question to this government weeks ago. At the time, that question was laughed off. At the time, the Prime Minister said it was not his problem. He said, quote, entirely under provincial jurisdiction. Well, I'm glad to see the Prime Minister understands now that a nation-to-nation relationship means that all levels of government must play a role. And that means the Prime Minister must play a role. Hear, hear. It's encouraging, Madam Speaker, to see that the Prime Minister is not calling for police to be sent in. We've seen the consequences of that type of response, and we do not want to go there. But it's troubling, Madam Speaker, it's troubling that it's taken so long for the Prime Minister to realize that there is a role for him to play and for the federal government to play. C'est tellement troublant que ça a pris assez de temps pour le gouvernement de réaliser qu'ils ont un rôle à jouer pour régler cette crise. Now, the fix or the solution to all of this, it's going to require hard work. It's going to require that we respect the principles of a nation-to-nation relationship. And that means having dialogue, having conversations. And that means the Prime Minister and the federal government have to play a role. It means we need to find a peaceful way forward. It means we need to find a way that respects human rights, the freedom of press, and most of all, the fundamental rights of Indigenous people. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission laid out a path forward. The United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People lays a course forward. But the TRC's path forward are calls to action, not calls to empty words. It's time for this government to back up those words. It's time for the Prime Minister to back up the words with real action. C'est maintenant le moment pour les actions concrètes. Ce n'est pas le temps pour les belles paroles, c'est le moment pour des actions concrètes pour régler le problème, pour réaliser la justice pour la communauté autochtone. This is our chance to do better. Not to just say better, but to actually do better. Now, if the Prime Minister is ready to move forward in a path of justice and fairness, then he can count on the New Democrats to work together to delivering real solutions that see a path forward for justice and fairness and that see a path forward out of this crisis. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Honorable député de Saanich, go silence.
Merci, Madame la Présidente, et merci à tous mes collègues pour l'opportunité aussi de parler un peu, de prendre la parole sur cette situation d'urgence, une situation qui demande à tout le monde, qui exige pour tous et tous de faire face à la réalité de l'injustice et le défi de réconciliation. This is a very important debate and this is a very important moment. In the constituency week, when I was home in my riding, one of my constituents said, as we discussed the blockades and discussed inconvenience and discussed what it means for settler culture Canadians to face inconvenience when Indigenous people have had their land stolen from them, their children stolen from them, their culture stolen from them in efforts to annihilate who they are as peoples. We have to weigh our inconvenience against the challenge of the moment. And this one constituent said to me, Priscilla said, can't we focus on the opportunity of such a rich conversation? When I heard some of the words of my colleagues, the words of the leader of the official opposition reminded me of something, so I flipped through to them. Their words heard on May 4th, 1877, actually, General Oliver Otis Howard, speaking of the frustrations he felt of dealing with the Nez Percés and their chiefs as they discussed what mattered to them. And he said, quote, 20 times over and over, I hear the earth is your mother. I want to hear it no more, but come to business at once. This is not simple, and it won't end overnight because it's based on centuries, a century and a half of injustice, oppression, and colonialism. But it's also based on the reality that since 1997, the Wet'suwet'en have had every reason to believe that based on the Supreme Court of Canada decision, the federal government would come talking about what does it mean that title for the Wet'suwet'en could be 22,000 square kilometers. What does it mean that the Supreme Court of Canada has said that their title and their indigenous form of government that predates Canada by thousands of years has status in Canadian law? We must not ever set out the notion that there's a rule of law on one side and Indigenous peoples on the other. Indigenous peoples have the law on their side, and maybe the leader of the official opposition, referring to a small group of radical activists, meant the 9 judges of the Supreme Court of Canada. Because they're the ones who said title is title is title. And Indigenous title is, quote, collective and intergenerational. And acknowledging that will explain why we stand in solidarity with Wet'suwet'en hereditary leadership. My colleague, the honourable member from Nanaimo Ladysmith, went up January 19th, met with hereditary leadership of Wet'suwet'en, came back and we've been trying as Greens to appeal to the federal government from the beginning. Don't let the RCMP arrest people. Don't let the RCMP, that huge encampment, what that cost Canada, a whole year of a remote location of RCMP detachment encampment on the edge of Wet'suwet'en territory. It's very remote. My colleague, the member for Nanaimo Ladysmith, got there and found that, yes, they had offered an alternative route. This was acknowledged, by the way, in the injunction case that granted an injunction to Coastal GasLink. The Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs had offered another location that avoided the Queest Trail, but Coastal GasLink, according to the court, unilaterally rejected the alternative. The federal government has to step up here. I'm glad the federal government is stepping up. It's true that on February 5th in this place, the Prime Minister said that this, quote, this is an issue entirely within provincial jurisdiction, unquote. That's true insofar as the pipeline goes. It doesn't cross a provincial border. But it's massively untrue when we talk about Indigenous rights, the Delgamuukw decision of 1997, the Chilcotin decision of 2014, and the big question, when First Nations win in our courts, what's the statute of limitations on us doing anything about it? The Wet'suwet'en have been enormously patient, and the Unistoten camp has been sitting there for 10 years. Ce n'est pas une question de grande surprise qu'il y a résistance des peuples autochtones partout au Canada. C'est clair. Il y a clair dans toutes les ententes. The Indigenous leadership across Canada has been saying for quite some time, if someone marches on your territory, we'll respond as if they'd marched on our territory. This is an aspect of solidarity, but for the solidarity of Indigenous peoples across Canada and their allies, people like me, people who are settler culture Canadians who recognize that this is a turning point for this country, where we actually mean what we say. When I heard the brilliant comment of the brilliant senator and former Justice Murray Sinclair from the other place, who said, what is this once again, as in Paul Simon and the Boxer, a pocket full of mumbles, such are promises. We must set aside our pocket full of mumbles. We must be serious in our intent. This is a land issue, this is a title issue, this is a justice issue, and it is only very incidentally a pipeline issue. C'est clair maintenant, on doit faire face à la réalité d'injustice, on doit faire face à la réalité et la grande promesse de réconciliation. Maintenant, c'est le moment
de dire oui au peuple autochtone et non à les cris comme tout le monde des autres discours qui dit que c'est un groupe radical. C'est pas vrai. C'est un groupe qui sont engagés dans le grand projet de justice. Now is the moment for Canada to face our moment of truth. Our moment of truth, justice, and reconciliation. Thank you.
Resuming debate, l'honorable ministre, j'aimerais informer la Chambre qu'en raison des déclarations ministérielles, les ordres émanant du gouvernement seront prolongés de 43 minutes. So, resuming debate, the honorable minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, today we're talking about the Canadian value of how we take care of each other when we're sick. We're talking about improvements to the employment insurance sickness benefits. On average, people who claimed sickness benefits in the fiscal year 2017 to 2018 used 10 weeks of the benefit and then returned to work. But quite a large cohort, 36%, or about 150,000 Canadians, exhausted their full 15 weeks before they could go back to work. And among those 150,000 Canadians, we know that women and older Canadians were more likely to need more than the 15 weeks. This is a very serious issue facing Canadians who are sick or injured. Imaginez-vous que vous élevez seuls vos enfants et que du jour au lendemain, vous n'êtes plus en mesure de payer les factures. Personne n'a besoin d'une telle